Greetings and welcome to Money Trip JA. Did you know that the money or the currency that you're currently using is not real? If that's something that you're interested in knowing about, then stick around. If you're new here, kindly hit the subscribe button and please don't forget to share the content and turn the like button blue, providing that any value was added to you or you were given a new perspective on these matters. When we spoke about money in our last sitting, we discussed that there are five main lies or fallacies, mistakes that many people make according to their philosophy, according to what the government impose upon them. But what we're here to tell you is that those philosophies will not get you to where you desire to be, because the first thing that we covered was money is not real. And you may be saying to yourself, I've been using this all my life. How could this not be real? Well, if we go back into history, we will realize that the original transfer of wealth and equity was in livestock, and that there was the currency in those days. Then, over time, men became a little bit more smarter and their population grew, so they tried to find a common ground. And then the next thing that they chose was to use gold and other metals. Over time, we realize that when the evil men are involved in the monetary supply and system, they have a tendency to become impulsive, in that they began a process called debasement. So in this debasement process, what happened is that if you had each coin worth in 1 ounce of gold, they will clip a few ounces of, or a few portions of, which reduces the confidence and the value of that said coin. And they'll not only flip or clip some of it off, they will also add other metals in it, which reduces its purity. So that there begins the idea of debasement, which will take us back into the fiat currency. Then people said, hey, the goldsmiths were becoming a little bit wiser, as they were storing the golds and giving receipts. So in them storing the golds and giving receipts, they thought to themselves, hey, we can give more receipts than we have gold. And that there again was another situation in which there was debasement, because there were more receipts out for gold that was not in the vaults, and that there created another challenge and another complication. I want you to know, before we get any further, that you are the wealth. Everything that you ever needed, all the money that you'll ever need, all the currency you'll ever desire, you already possess it. And only time will allow you to extract it. It is not about making money. It is actually about adding value to people's life. And once you add value to someone's life, then inevitably, guess what's going to happen? You are going to be rewarded for the value that you have contributed. So as we move down the timeline, we realize that the governmental system could not be trusted. And then when wars are being fought, people have a tendency to overextend themselves. But before we get into the First World War, what we need to understand is that in China, back in the early period, in the 18th century, there was a decree in which the Chinese currency was slated to be the order of the day. The trick with this currency is that it was not tied to anything whatsoever. So the people were forced actually to use the currency, or else they will experience debt. And most persons chose, by being complicit, to use the currency. And this continued for quite some time before World War. But what we need to understand is that as time progresses, men's mind will become a little bit more sophisticated and ingenious in the utilization of the resources that they had. So what they decided to do was to create a system in which they uncoupled the currency from what was backing it, that was gold at the time. So the different superpowers were engaging in different wars. But America at the time was not involved in the war directly until the latter 6 months of the war. So every country was getting military grade supplies, arsenal from the Americas and other countries, and they were being paid in gold. So what happened is that America had majority of the gold. If you are smart, you understand why they became the superpower, and I know that you are. However, I want you to indicate in the chat, in the comments, and let me know which other entity has the second most, if not equal to, the American amount of gold. And you may be surprised, but let me hear what you have. The answer will be at the end of this session. Yes, so now back into the history lesson. So during the last 6 months of the war, the American entered the war and just put some final touches, which mean that they did not spend a lot of resources per se, but they captured majority of the resources. And the Americans at this time was giving out backed notes, fiat currency that were actually backed by gold. However, over time, they had more fiat currency in circulation than they had gold in the vault. And then over time, the president, Nixon, would decouple or unlink the redeemability of the currency to gold. And there was even a time in history when those American citizens who had gold had to turn them in or force imprisonment. So money has been coming a far way. And the reason for decoupling the currency from gold was so that they could inflate the value and print more. And in printing more, there is less value intrinsically with that currency. So with the mentioned value of this currency, we have what we see as inflation. And in some countries, we have runaway inflation. We have had a situation in which Zimbabwe experienced this in a previous time. And this brings us to what we have today as fiat currency. As it is by decree, the government institution indicates that this is what is legal tender, even though it is unbacked. So now that we have that out of the way. So the money that may be used in the Caribbean and other jurisdictions, because they were not linked to anything, then they are also fiat currency. And history would prove to us that these currencies that are unlinked eventually end up at zero. There have been thousands of fiat currencies, and at the end of the day, they all end in zero. Advent of the new era, even the great dollar will go to a value of zero based on the debt to GDP ratio over time. And then that will mark the introduction of the crypto. And that is why many banks and many financial institutions are now moving in towards digitalizing the currency, putting it on ledgers, zeros and one, saying that they're giving you quick and easy access. But this here is a step in a good direction, but also a step in a bad direction. Before we go, I want us to have a basic comprehension as the principle of money. In order for something to be money, it needs to be a medium of exchange. It means that someone has to be using it and to buy and sell, trade items for goods and services. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria, it needs to be a unit of account, which means that it is going to be able to be placed on a ledger, so we can have bookkeeping, record keeping, so we can verify and validate. It needs to be fungible. It needs to be interchangeable. It means that $1 here is $1 there. $1 in X hand is $1 in Y's hand. So it needs to have that and have it over a period of time. This money needs also, or currency needs to be portable. we're discussing money, so it needs to be portable, which means you can move it from one place to another. Gold was not really as portable because of the weight, but it served, it has a portability to it because the gold could be divided and deconstructed into smaller bars. Then it needs to be durable, which means that you have to put out effort in order to destroy it. And we know that gold has to be heated at high temperature. And one thing that we need to understand, needs to be divisible. So you can break them down into different parts and move right along. Throughout history, most currency fulfilled these six requirements. However, the drawback with the currency and money is that money maintains a store of value, which means that we cannot just haphazardly increase them or decrease them. So that there is a separator between money and currency. So now you know the difference. And for the question that we ask, which country or which entity has the second most, if not the most amount of gold in its reserve? And if you didn't guess it or you didn't research it, the answer is the Vatican. I hope that this session would have given you insight as to money, knowing that it is not real, but it is only by decree in the current form that we're utilizing it. In other subsequent episodes, we'll get a little deeper in understanding the rudimentary of currency. Thanks for spending some time with us here on Money Trip JA, where we use cents to make dollars. Until next time, when we will continue the fun. Signing out is Dr. A.